What's your name?
Tony Henday.
Okay. Please welcome to the show, Anthony Henday.
It's Tony Henday.
Okay.
Welcome everybody.
There he is. There's your warm welcome.
Nice to
They
be here.
love you.
I
They
prefer to go
love
by
you.
Tony. I prefer to go by Tony if we're gonna get into the technicalities. And
It's a more
I think maybe people might know me by the ring road like you just mentioned, but I think it might go back even a little bit further than that. Maybe some of the first Europeans we have in the country might remember the exploits I had exploring the interior of the Canadian Northwest. Maybe not. I'm not sure. Hello, anyways. I'm here. I'm Tony Henday.
Thanks
It's
for
good to see you.
Well, thanks for being here, Tony. Have you looked outside at all? Have you noticed what's changed today?
I did notice.
Wow, hey, what a dump.
I've had some pretty huge dumps in my time, that's for sure.
In the province, or were you in another province?
Yeah, it was a big one today. I've shoveled some roofs in my time.
Did you get up there?
Oh yeah. Got up there and shoveled the old roofs off, and so good times. What else is going on?
You've got lots more experience with podcasts than I do, and because you've listened to so many more.
I do listen to quite a few. That's the nice thing I think about podcasts is you get to ramble on about whatever it is, whatever subject your heart desires. Most of the time you might think nobody wants to listen to me talk about this, but it's a weird world. It's amazing who might actually want to listen to you talk about the stupidest things or whatever comes out of your brain, right? And it's really interesting listening to people and conversating and having their thought processes said out loud. And so I really enjoy podcasting. It's I feel like you get to know people. So long format interviews, right? Or long format chats. So
well, I grew up in a radio family, so I am not used to the sort of meandering type conversations. I was always sort of taught, and when you get on the air, you say what you need to say, and you get the heck off, and because your audience is, no dead air, and you used to say, if you want to kill your show, open the phone line. And, in a lot of cases, he's right. But, I like what you said. There's two things that kind of surprised me as I enter my sort of podcast adventure. People do want to hear conversations about a topic that they're interested in. And you know what? They want to hear it in a way that sounds like it's coming from real people that they might run into or hang out with, and so I think that personal connection is there for sure.
Yeah. Some of my favorite podcasts, like they're just guys, like I name dropping, but I listened to one, it's called Turned Out a Punk. And as a guy my age, he's a music lover, he's in bands, but he gets to interview some of my favorite musicians, and just like listening to a guy that just seems very similar to me, have really interesting conversations with interesting people. I was like, wow, it's a privilege to get to listen to those things sometimes, and there's so much content out there, like it's pretty incredible. I hope our podcast, though, maybe our podcast shouldn't just be about talking about other podcasts.
No, but because this is, like I say, the beginning of the adventure, I think it's important to kind of understand, not only for me and you and our listeners, but also for people that might want to start their own podcast. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So I mean, if we can do anywhere near Joe Rogan numbers in our first couple of months, I think we'd be off to a good start. And he always preaches the importance of starting podcasts. He pushes it on everybody. He's probably the main influencer in why there are so many podcasts. I listen to weird shit though, like not weird shit, I guess, but I just go all over. Like I'll go from true crime to punk rock to obscure history to skateboarding to whatever, like, and then you end up getting into like weird comedy ones and just randoms, and yeah, it's just
and
really interesting, you know?
like you just did, you did a name drop. So as soon as you hear one of your favorite podcasters do that, well, then you go down that rabbit hole, and then you got a new
Mm-hmm.
subscription or
Oh,
whatever,
for
and then
sure.
and they've and now you're part of a
Mm-hmm.
new family, and it's an
Yeah.
exciting. I think it's an exciting, which kind of way to include yourself in stuff that maybe you didn't know
And it's
you had
more
access
interesting, I
to.
think. Yeah, I think it's more interesting a lot of time than like TV and watching stuff, you know, where it's like so
It's,
one-sided. You're just
yeah.
watching a show or a movie. Like I was talking to my friend the other day, who I don't see ever and don't hang out with that much, but we were chatting on the phone, and I was like, "So what are you into? Like, what are you consuming? You know, because as much as like consumer is this negative connotation with it, like we consume, every single person I've ever met in my life is consuming a fair amount of media right now in 2020.
Oh yeah.
And from if it's shows or podcasts or music or whatever, you're consuming some type of entertainment. And so I was like, what are you into? And he's like, what do you mean? And I was like, well, what are you listening to? And he's like, oh, no. And I was like, what, you're podcasting? And he's like, oh, I guess, you know, the same stuff you're listening to. And I was like what? And he's like, I don't know, a little bit of the UFC. And I was like, no. I was like, there's so much content out there now, you know, and so many podcasts.
Yeah,
And
and there,
it's
you
like,
got to
what are you
find your
into?
niche.
Like,
Yeah,
yeah, you know, I'm like,
that's what you're
I'm
asking
listening
him,
to
right? What's your niche?
yeah, I'm like, I'm
Where?
listening to
Yeah.
15 things right now that interest me kind of, or were pulling me in. And I was like, what do you know? But anyways, what I found out is,
What's the one you're listening right to right now that surprises you the most? Is there like that one that kind of?
that's a really good question, actually. Well, like, there's stuff I listen to that I'm not surprised that I'm into, but I'm amazed by. I listen to a skateboarding podcast that has
Hmm.
been like unbelievably eye-opening and cool to listen to. I'm just looking through my list right now. Something that surprises
Yeah,
me that
just
I
one that
listen.
you kind of thought, you know what, man, I never would have thought
Yeah, I'm
that
trying.
I saw that coming, or if someone hadn't pushed that my way, I doubt I ever would have found it on my own, or just kind of that
Uh,
hidden gem, that.
Yeah, you know what? I'm looking and I don't know, because everything I think kind of fits into like stuff that I'm interested. Maybe Alec Baldwin's podcast. I doubt I would have ever thought I listened to Alec Baldwin's podcast, but I've listened to quite a bit of Alec Baldwin's podcast. So probably that surprises me, I guess. But
Yeah.
I'm looking at his list. He gets good guests like Robbie Robertson, Burton Cummins, Daryl Hall, and then like lots of like cool movie guys and even just like artists in general. He seems to have a good pull for the guests he gets on. So I'm listening to the guy that wrote Rounders, the movie Rounders with Matt Damon.
Hmm.
Um, that guy, whatever his name is, Brian Koppelman. I'm
Hmm.
listening to his podcast lately, and I just listened to Mike Campbell from Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers,
Oh man,
just talking
what a
about, and it's
musician! What a
well, yeah,
musician!
and so because Koppelman's a writer, he's wrote a bunch of movies, and like writing is his craft. He gets into it with everybody about their crafts, right? So he gets into Mike Hamill about the writing process, and like everybody I've listened to even so far, it's just about what's their process, how do they structure, you know, whatever their craft is, and I
Hmm.
like listening to that, like hearing the weird minutia of people and how they, you know, they go through their process. And
Hmm.
I think it's helpful if you're like, if you got hobbies and shit you like to do that's, you know, your own little thing. It's like, it's nice to hear other people's process, because you're like, oh yeah, okay, cool, you know, and you can take little things from it, or you can realize maybe the way you're doing things isn't so strange and isolated, and like, oh yeah, actually a lot of people like work in these weird creative bubbles.
Like,
Anyways, Alec Baldwin, I was talking about how much of a babe he was when he was younger. No, which one was the good looking one? Steven Backdraft. No, it was that
okay.
Billy Baldwin. No, I think that's,
See,
I don't know.
I had a different calendar than you did.
But you remember Backdraft with Kurt Russell, right? That fireman movie. If
As
you haven't seen
brothers.
Backdraft, you haven't never really lived, I don't think. So
Just a minute ago, when you were saying you get these ideas and then you question your own thinking, or you question your own methods, or maybe you're inspired by something, like if you're listening to a musician's podcast and it gets you to pick up your guitar again, or what, isn't that the difference between binge watching on all these other platforms and not
yeah,
getting the kind of content that's going to question your thinking? I mean, maybe you'll watch a movie or a documentary that does sort of give you new information, and maybe it does change the way you think or apply knowledge or whatever. But when you hear people converse about a topic, not only does it allow you to choose where you stand on the topic, but it also allows you an opportunity to see or listen to someone model a conversation about it.
yeah. I'm a nerd, and so like I like nerding out on things, you know, like
Geeking
I
out. Yeah.
I just find it also interesting. Like popping in my head, like all those Ken Burns documentaries. I'm just
Oh,
like is that
so good.
are they not the most well done, interesting things ever? You're like, what a fucking crazy catalog that guy's created. So like that would be one thing I guess I would be watching, where I was like, whoa, like every time I watch anything that's Ken Burns, you're just like 17 hours late. What? 6 months and 17 hours later of watching time, you get through it, and you're like,
And then you start
whoa.
again, and then you start
Well,
again.
yeah, my friend just said that to me about the Vietnam one. He's like, dude, I'm watching that for my 4th time.
Yeah.
And I was like, whoa, I lived and died, it felt like, with that freaking documentary. That thing took me an entire summer to get through Vietnam. You know?
With that knowledge, it sometimes you get excited about it. Like I remember watching the Ken Burns country music documentary.
Oh, yeah.
And I didn't think I was even into country music.
Yeah.
I was watching it at my brother-in-law's, and I was kind of like, it's in the background, and I kind of recognized the song, so it made me look at the TV, and then I was like, maybe I'll check out what he's talking about. And Ken Burns has this magical way of just pulling you in and just, oh my goodness, and holding your hand as he takes you on this wonderful journey and of information and knowledge. You like your friend, you watch it 4 times, so now this knowledge is ingrained in you. Now you know the dates and the times and the names and the cities and all that. And so when you hear someone in a casual conversation talk about country music and say, this is who Dolly Parton was, or this is who, Hank Williams Jr. was, and they get it wrong, well, holy man.
Yeah.
You jump the fence. You're like, wait a second, because you've seen it 4 times, and it's like, listen, that girl.
That's kind of
like you're defending Dolly Parton all of a sudden. Because
I know, but that's my problem with podcasts and everything. I think is that too, like the too much ownership of all of those things, right? You're like, because really, what did you do? You just watched the documentary, but all of a sudden you're like the expert scholar on it, and
well,
so
not only the expert, but the defender of all.
Oh man, if
speak against
it. If I had a quarter for every time, like I said to my wife, like, well, I heard on a podcast that, like I start a sentence, or just in my life in general, like, yeah. But I feel like a lot of it's legitimate stuff, because it's like, I actually learned this stuff. But when you start the sentence with like, well, I was listening to this podcast, like it almost instantly like takes away from any credibility that you're going to say.
But what you really meant was the information is out there, and you've come across it.
It's like, hey, no, I was listening to like I was listening to the head of genetics at frickin' Harvard Medical School. Like I wasn't listening to Joe Blow Nobody, but
we used to say, I read it in the Encyclopedia Britannica, and that was legit.
Yeah,
and now
it was fine.
Yeah.
What were they called? World books? Do you remember those?
There was like 3. There's 3 in the library, and the one that everyone used was the World Book Encyclopedia. And the thing was you needed to pick a topic. I'm not even kidding. I'm a little older than you, so I had to live through this.
Do a research paper on the blue whale, and you just go to the book and you'd make notes out of the entire B section on blue whale.
Yeah, because that was the only reason, and every teacher knew it. They would, they tried, but they didn't. They would say, well, try to get 2 resources. You mean other than the encyclopedia? Yes, please. No. You mean the other encyclopedia?
I think my mom bought me like a set of those.
Oh, there's no greater gift. There's no better way of showing a child your love than buying them a set of encyclopedia. And we'll get you the yearbook when it comes out.
That's all I got was toys that I didn't need. So, and everybody knows if you spoil your kids, what happens to them.
Why didn't you need them? Dang, I needed all the toys.
I don't. Let's change topics completely. What else you got? I know you got an agenda a little bit, so fire something at me.
Fire something at you? Well, why don't we we'll take a question from one of one of our viewers texted one in. Have you ever gone skydiving? That's the question. No skydiving. Would you?
Next question. Kind of want to. I always had this not weird, I guess, but I always liked the books about Everest. This is changing it a little bit from skydiving. And so
heights?
The stories of Everest. And so I always had in my mind, I'm like, one day I'm going to climb Mount Everest. And I kind of have the same feelings with skydiving. I'm like, one day when I'm older, I'm going to like work up the courage to skydive. And so it seems pretty awesome. It's just a glorious time, apparently. Yeah. So I think I'm probably going to go sooner than later.
See, I believe that you would climb Everest. You know what else I believe? I believe you'd do it by yourself. I believe you'd probably do it on a whim. You'd probably meet some friends on the way up, probably score some oxygen on the way and make it. Instead of telling everyone about it, you'd probably find something else to do.
With the exception of today, because it snowed so much, I think I was on my bike every morning consistently for the last almost 2 months.
Yeah. Well, it rained a couple mornings, but yeah, you were out there a lot, man.
I rode in the rain, dude. I rode in the rain. I didn't miss a day.
Man, those
I rode in the snow. I rode in the ice this year. Everything that it's given us in the last month, I went out in it every morning.
Beautiful. And those sunrises are something else.
They make you feel like cool. It's too funny. I'm
gonna
hijack this for a minute. Oh,
no, go ahead.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
And I came here, explored the whole northwest of Canada. They've named a ring road after me. A ring road. Like, how many people have a ring road named after them? Not many.
What's the ring road in Calgary?
Exactly. They didn't have anybody else to name it after. It was me, and that's it.
That's it.
Tony Henday. It meant crazy if you think about it. Like, you're hiking or like walking into Western Canada or walking through the prairies in the wintertime in the 1600s must have been just wild to think of what that experience was like. And then like eventually when you come to the Rocky Mountains, you just been like, holy geez. Like after prairie, I mean it's prairies, but I think the prairies then would probably have been a little different because a lot of it's been cleared farmland. So there's probably a lot more trees and, like if you actually dig into Saskatchewan and Manitoba, there's a lot of cool, beautiful areas and like not mountains, but these foothills, that valleys, like things that you just don't traditionally, everybody thinks Saskatchewan and Manitoba are flat. But then when you actually know about the province, like their provincial parks and there's a lot of really incredible areas. I'm sure it was even better back when Tony Henday, when I was exploring. So basically how I got here tonight, I don't want to get into the super finite or what's the word? Minutia?
That's a good word. If you can make it work, let's do it. That's a good word.
Is it a good word?
Yeah. Minutia.
I think I might have used it earlier in the podcast. I might be doubling up on my words. That's the thing. I only have so many words, and so once I hit my max, I start going back and repeating them. So anyways, I came from the 1600s to come do the podcast tonight, you guys. So
that's pretty impressive.
Modern food. I'm drinking mead, which is an ancient drink. Mead, if you didn't know, is considered the drink of the gods. Fermented honey, and has been used for thousands of years as a healing tonic that people drink. So I grabbed some mead.
Isn't that in the old poetry, like the Geoffrey Chaucer stuff and all that? Is that what they used to swill back then in the old Shakespeare days? The mead?
Yeah. Well, they wanted mead, but they were probably just doing like fermented toe juice or something.
Whatever. Like just what's the stuff they make in prison? What's the stuff they make in prison?
Off of our toes.
Pruno, I think it's called.
That's what you say if you ever go to jail.
Pruno. I'm the Pruno master.
If you get put in jail, you get put in jail for life, and your cellmate, he's also in prison for life, you could at least be like, "Hey, man, I have a really good feeling that you and me are gonna be friends forever."
I've seen so many prison movies that there's no way I will even I won't even jaywalk because I saw Shawshank so many times. No way, man. Because you think you're on White Ave. You've had a couple. You're like, I'll just cross here, and then that flashback. You're gonna end up working in the laundry room. Don't cross the street.
No, and he got free in the end. He got free. He got to live and work on his boat, remember? All was good. He got to get rid of that wife that was cheating on him. He didn't have to deal with her and her nagging anymore. He got to meet Morgan Freeman, who's a pretty cool dude, hang out with him for a few years. And then he got to free, and he working on his boat at the end. I think that when you really look at it, it's perspective. And when you look at it like that, I think maybe jaywalking could be the best decision you ever make in your life. You never know. Robert Frost says something about taking the lesser traveled road.
Yeah.
Well, that's what Andy Dufresne did in Shawshank Redemption, and it got him a boat. And so if you get a boat, that's good. We went to the movie San Andreas, which is about the San Andreas Fault, right? And it's going to be this big earthquake that takes place, and this doomsday scenario in San Francisco. The Rock, I can't remember, movie ends with a big earthquake, not everybody dying, a bunch of people dying. He saves the chick in the movie. American flag gets dropped at the end, and all is happy. Anyways, I did that whole movie. I wish I could show you, but I did it in emojis on my phone and texted it to my friend, who watched it with me, and then we started doing like emoji movies to each other on our phones. It's pretty funny.
Oh, that's
It's a
fun
pretty funny.
too. You know, I was following a hockey player, and that's his regular routine was he would get on the bus and he would say, "Guess the movie we're watching in emojis," and that was such a fun little
Ah, yeah, yeah.
exercise.
That's a fun game, right? Because
It,
you can actually, emojis are just the modern day hieroglyph. And I can say actually
yeah,
sometimes a lot more with emoji than I can with a text. Because when you're texting, you can't put tone into text all the time. You
yeah,
know? It's
yeah.
like you can text and be like, it just doesn't always come across your tone. It's like, oh, that seems like that person's being rude to me. Well, like, how do you know? You don't know the tone. With emojis, you know. When you do that, like, crazy face or you do the wink, and the ha, you know what that means. And so you can add to your text through emojis. You add a little bit more to the language because you can add tone and you can add like your feeling behind what you're trying to communicate
Mm-hmm.
through emojis, which you couldn't just do through text.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like the modern day hieroglyph. Eventually we're gonna have no language, probably,
Well, you
so we'll
know,
just
it's
do
true what you're saying.
emojis.
Like, if you and me are communicating with emojis, we've already established our emoji vocabulary. But if you start firing emojis to a stranger or someone that you haven't established that visual vocabulary with, you may trip yourself up, man. You know that embarrassment one where the guy has his eyes really wide and his
Yeah, it's
cheeks
like
are red?
sheepish.
But
Yeah. Oh yeah,
maybe
yeah, that one. I
maybe
like
I
that
don't
one.
understand what it meant, but they don't have like a legend or whatever on my
Well,
phone. You have to have experience,
listen,
right?
there's some pretty common ones. When you do that one, like the wide open eyes, like I don't know. I think that speaks for itself. I've never
Well,
got an
obviously
emoji
it
from
doesn't.
anybody where I questioned what their emoji meant. I'm just
That's what
gonna
I
get
mean.
fired up more. Listen, I'm one mead and a quarter of a glass of wine in and a half bowl of popcorn.
Hmm.
Like I'm ready to go. Ready
Yeah.
to go.
Have you ever put a review
You
into
know.
Rotten Tomatoes? You watched a movie, didn't like it,
I've
you're like,
never
"Ah, I'm gonna
I've
put a 3 out of 10."
never put a review into Rotten Tomatoes. I'm trying to
Mm.
think, but I've never even did a review online in my life.
I wonder who
Even though I
does
use
them.
reviews. What's that?
I wonder who does.
Yeah, somebody, because I read them all the time. I'm like, oh, I'm gonna watch this movie. I better read the reviews first and make sure I want to watch it. And so I always am reading them. I'm like, oh, I'm gonna order this on Amazon. I better read 100 reviews first. And so I make sure I confirm that I'm making a good decision. But yet I've never made a review. One of a hilarious night I had once is I got onto a Yelp page
Oh
of
no. Oh
at my
no.
friend's house. We were looking something up, and we ended up on like a local guy's Yelp page, and he was reviewing everything from like the Domo gas pump to the Boston Pizza to the 7-Eleven to whatever. He went through every single thing he does in his
And
life.
he's
He
got
reviewed
10,000
everything.
more subscribers than I
Oh
have.
my, they were the funniest. Like, and I don't think he was trolling them. Like, I think they were serious responses, and like, I can't even recreate the magic of some of the things that guy wrote. But we sat there for like an hour and read these Yelp reviews and just laughed and laughed. And I was like, this guy is either like, well, he must have just been a comedic genius, really. And so
Hmm.
some kind of a savant that was like, and that guy will never know that we spent an hour reading his Yelp reviews and just like enjoying them so much. Maybe I don't know, maybe he knew when he wrote them that they would be appreciated comedically.
My dad was on radio, and so if you wanted an audience, you had to get on a radio station, and generally a competing radio station. So you're all competing for that
Yeah, radio
audience. But now you
sucks.
don't need to
Radio
do that.
sucks.
Now
No.
you don't need to have the whole audience. You just need your little audience, your family,
Hmm.
your listeners, the ones that are interested in what you're talking about, or your guests and stuff. So
Did you ever listen to any Terry, Bill, and Steve on K? Is it called K97? I think. Did you ever
I
listen to those guys?
I have, yep, yep.
I listen. Like I don't know what they're doing now because I haven't listened for many years. But
Hmm.
probably like a good 2 years or something when I was commuting a lot. And this was before podcasts, and so like you had to listen to morning talk radio. I'd listen to those guys every morning. There was some hilarious moments on those radio shows, like and breakdowns, like the time that like they broadcast out of West Edmonton Mall, and the time that I can't remember why, but security wouldn't let them into the studio to do the show in the morning. Like there was some issue with security,
Hmm.
and they blew up online or on air.
Hmm.
And then they called the one guy, Steve. He had went home because he was just so mad he couldn't go to work and do his job, and some security guard was like forbidding him from being in the mall. So he went online, he was dropping F-bombs on live air, and it was just chaos. And like that happened, and then they fired him, but then the listeners like missed him and garnered enough support to bring him back. And like I don't know, the amount of shenanigans and like times just things went off the rails with those guys. It was pretty good morning radio. I enjoyed those guys.
Well, you know, that's the other thing is we get treated to real life. We get treated to real emotion.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
The real person.
They were like podcasters before the podcasters, kind of like it was like raw, and those guys were just like regular local guys that said hilarious things, and you know, like, and it definitely went off the rails. Like it didn't feel corporate. Like they tried to do their job and have to listen to the corporate, you know.
We've been talking for an hour and 15 minutes, and
all right.
And I'm going to probably try to cut it down to 20, and then just to make it super tight.
You heard it here, folks. You heard it here.
Yeah.
Fake news.
Censorship.
It's happening on our podcast right now.
Yeah.
First episode, censorship.
It's
I'm going to cut
bullshit.
it down right from the horse's mouth.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you think that you're getting real news, you're not. This is fake news. Fake news from Alberta. I don't know where in Alberta, secret location. But
pretty much when you start off, that's what I was going to say. As soon as you start off introducing your guest as Tony Henday,
listen,
they can figure out the
anywhere.
fake news part themselves.
All of Western Canada.
They can figure it out.
I could be from anywhere. Rocky Mountain House, Bentley, Detler, Lethbridge, Medicine Hat, Swift Current. Do I need to keep going through possible places I could be from? Because I literally could do it all night. Well, let's just be honest. Let's just be honest, because we're talking about this.
Mm-hmm.
So our listeners out there, all of our listeners know, we are doing this to provide you with quality content and entertainment, but we're also doing this to get rich and quit our day jobs. We want the money, and we're going to get it by any means possible via our local podcast with many listeners. And so thank you all for supporting. I can hear the caribou calling and the wind whistling, the moose are mooing, and the cows are gazing.
We need the crickets. Put crickets on the soundboard. All right, everyone. To all our listeners out there.
Yeah. So I'm going to head back out on my travels and get my snowshoes strapped back on, head out into the cold northerly winds and the darkness of these brisk Alberta nights, and I will bid you farewell.
All right, man.
My good friend.
Well, thanks for joining me tonight. It was. I'm glad we kind of broke the cherry.
I think that it's popped the cherry, but...
What did I say?
Broke the cherry.
Oh, did I break it?
I think that says a little bit more about you than you wanted to.
I broke the cherry. Oh, that's...
I don't know. I'm not saying you're a violent person.
Boy, I can see that's going to hit the editing floor. That needs to be censored.
No. I think that should be the name of the podcast. Broke the cherry.
Broke the cherry.
Right. Okay, well, it's been long enough for everybody to be with us tonight. So thanks for coming to the first inaugural episode. It's been great talking with everybody.
Yeah.
My name's Tony Henday, and
thank you for being the guest.
It's been good. It's been real.
And you did it, man. You guessed it, and you did a good job tonight.
It's been real.
And it's going to be great having
go
you
watch
back.
Backdraft. Go watch Backdraft.
Ciao for now, buddy.
All right. Ciao for now, buddy.
Now.